Państwu przyjemnej podróży.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome warmly all of you, those of you who decided to arrive to the room to listen to our panel regarding wave of lifestyle regulation. Why is the assault on personal freedoms growing? In a way of introduction, I want to say that this panel should not surprise anyone on the conference organized by the liberal community, protection of human rights to choose on your own, shape your private life, your intimate life, your lifestyle. It has always been in the center of liberal beliefs. Philosophers have been doing all they could in the centuries to convince that personal freedoms are very important. John Locke started it. I believe that this name might ring a bell to some of you. In the 17th century, he has came up with a theory of social contract, and he was preaching that in the natural state, everyone had full freedoms, but they could face violence. Someone could come, take away their belongings or harm them. So the state was created in order to protect violence, to protect their freedom. So if the state is limiting freedom, then it's acting contrary towards its mission. The next theory was of that every rationally thinking human being, no matter what his view are, or her view as what are the aspirations and dreams of the person, should the person be in such a situation that he or she doesn't know what type of society he or she would live in, what would be the values of the majority of people surrounding, the person would always choose freedom because the person might be afraid of being in the minority. And if there would be no personal freedoms, then he or she could face discrimination and be persecuted. So despite for that, the repressions on personal freedoms, all the types of states within the history were more or less brutal. Even liberal democracy is not free from such attempts. And this is what we are going to discuss today. So please allow me to present you my panelists. Klaudia Jachira, an actress, as of 2009, a member of the Polish Parliament from Civic Coalition, and she has been a member of the Green Party within the coalition. Thank you for the invitation. Ewa Szymanowska, member of parliament, an entrepreneur, a lecturer of university in Łódź. She also is, as of 2023, a member of parliament from the Trzecia Droga and 2050 of Szymon Hołownia. Thank you very much for coming here. Gabriel Hawryluk, economic analyst and politologist from Civil Development Forum, co-author of a report which we are going to talk about. The title is Public Policy Based on Evidence. And last but not least, Ziemowit Szczerek, a writer, publicist, an author of a book, Murder is Coming Up to Eat Us, and others. He publishes inter alia in Politics newspaper and others. Welcome. Staying aside of the scenario I was planning, I would like to ask all of you to relate to the topic in the title of the panel. We are speaking about a wave of lifestyle regulations. So could every single one of you please shortly let me know whether you agree with the thesis from the topic that within the last 5 or 10 years, in the last period, we have the growing pressure, aggression or on personal freedoms. Is there a wave of regulation of lifestyle, not only in Poland, but overall in the world, in the Western world? So let me begin with my left side, poseł Jachira. Yes, I feel so, very much so. If I was to begin speaking of freedoms, because we will still probably have the time to define what does it mean that they are taking our freedom away. But I definitely do feel that from one year to another, I have less and less freedom. There is less and less freedom. And I believe that if I was to tell you since when it started growing, I think it's been at least a decade. And I'm speaking about our country. Of course, those probably are different. It differs in different member states of Europe, and it differs from the whole of the world. It's not always same, but without a doubt, I feel it. And I wouldn't be here with you today, and I wouldn't be because you've presented me with what I was doing until 2019 and what I'm doing after that. I would probably never get engaged so actively into the politics unless I felt that there is a threat that freedoms are being taken away from me as a woman and taken freedoms away from me to decide that I want to live in a secular state, and also unless I wouldn't feel that my economic freedoms free market is going away, that it's more and more difficult to run sole proprietorships. I didn't agree to that. And it wasn't enough for me to just complain at a lunch with family. This is why my answer is yes, I feel that. So we agree. Szymanowska Eva, member of the parliament. I feel it's in a similar way as Klaudia. Being an activist, I was an activist, and now I'm a politician because I wanted something to change, and just being on the street wasn't enough. I felt I have to do something to make an attempt to log in into the system. It's my first term now, but I already know how difficult it is. Because when it comes to people who want to give freedoms to others, such as I am or Klaudia is, there are some members of parliament. We lose with the conservative side, unfortunately, populistic. We want freedoms, but we are voting on conservative, radical politicians, and this is scary to me. That the truth is that we could solve many issues. Because if there are questions that someone says, because my church doesn't allow me for something, it's not in line with what my church preaches, go ahead, you can live with what your church preaches, it's your freedom. And why would other follow whatever church preaches? This is something I disagree with. And unfortunately, part of politicians are following what church tells them to. Gabriel Hawryluk, the floor is yours. Is there a wave? Yes. I believe it depends on what type of lifestyles are we speaking of. If we take a look at freedoms such as sexual freedom, from the social point of view, there is liberalization if we take a look at it. So there is more and more of permission for different lifestyle in this respect. But when it comes to legal framework, not much has changed. Still, it's growing. When it comes to religion, I think that we are more and more tolerant in the society. But what's growing for sure there is a wave of attacks on lifestyles, and this is about regulating, over-regulating, and taking certain choices in the name of citizens. For instance, when it comes to unhealthy foods, the way how people want to live, and what and where people should do things. So now Ziemowit Szczerek, do we have a wave? I'm not sure whether it's a wave, but for sure we have some sort of attempts of interfering with the freedoms, and it's on the both sides. On the side of institutions, just like my four speakers said, conservative politicians, for instance, are trying to force people who are not interested in some religious preaching by a church that is rooted somewhere in the far history and is not able to answer to the modern times questions. But there is also this bottom-up wave of attempts to regulate, or maybe people are just postulating to regulate because it's not supported with precise actions yet. So there is something like a leftist moral mood, and I'm criticizing all the bad sides, but there are also good sides to it, such as you've started with your intervention with saying female and male panelists. Some time ago, you wouldn't name both, so there was a movement that led us to do so. So all movements has pros and cons, and here we really have to be very cautious to differentiate pluses from minuses, pros from cons. I'm always mentioning the female form as the first one and male as the second. You probably should be swapping. So let's now go with the first round of questions. There will be a different question to each one of you. Gabriel, Hawryluk, let's come back to the report you were co-creating. You wrote in the report a chapter regarding oppression and legal limitations, which were used in a realistic way towards individual freedoms during the Law and Justice government. Could you briefly describe us what precise ways of limiting freedoms were there, especially how do you perceive this perspective that those recommendations are going to be implemented now, that there is another different government in Poland?
I would generally go back a bit to what was before, but of course I will answer the question first. I think when it comes to the aspect of approach to freedom, how state looks at a citizen, we have two kinds of approaches. Western one, European one, related to countries where this liberal democracy functioned for a certain time. Citizen is then treated as a person with own mind, and then some consequences maybe of some stupid decisions can be there. And on the other side of Iron Curtain, the vision of a citizen that has to be kept on a short leash, so to say, and to tell him what he has to do. So those are small things. When we talk about lifestyles, those are small regulations. I see sometimes if we look at in what countries it's legal to cross the street on red light and in what countries not. Where is it legal to drink alcohol in public spaces and where not? Then we will see this division of that iron curtain. And then there is this tendency with, of course, certain exemptions. And, of course, some new threats, paradoxically, coming from the West in a form of a freedom of speech and some other moral risks. But generally, from the report, what happened during Law and Justice rules, what expectations I had from a new, my main hopes were that the trade will be restored in Sunday, as from what was mentioned in the report, It was also a prohibition for energy drinks for minors, tax on alcohol products, from tobacco products. From all that, I expected most that a trade in Sunday will be restored. Who also waited for that? Raise your hand. I mean, who wouldn't like to go back? Well, we have some followers and someone against. If you don't want, just don't go to shop in Sunday. I expected that going back to trade in Sunday, but for me, a year or 2 years ago, I saw it was a compromise in the opposition that this regulation has to be liberated. We still wait. I think it will be proceeded in a commission. It was frozen. I mean, there are some steps in a good direction in this regard. I still count that it will be possible, and at least we will go that way. Then we can go further. But other things, honestly, I did not expect. I think that political climate and social is that I did not expect that any of such changes will be maybe a pill a day after pill. Maybe that's another thing I maybe expected, but there's still a man in the presidential palace that still sits there and is an obstacle. But that was one of the changes I expected for. Then I did not expect that new ruling team will like to regulate so much. I expected that not much will change. Something will go one way, something else the other way. And my impression is that there was like a war announced to any kind of stimulants and so on. Minister Leszczyna is here on the front line of inventing new regulations, limitations. From what I heard, to ban nicotine pouches. In my opinion, it is so much regulative and it's against any kind of policy to reduce harms. These products are generally much less harmful. One of least harmful as of ways of intake nicotine. So it's pushing people into inhaling, which is more harmful. And another proposal from Ministry of Finances to increase tax 227% growth of tax for other tobacco products as compared to regular cigarettes, were 77% during years. We can be happy that at least there is no complete ban on smoking cigarettes from a given year, from a certain age. Another question to MP Jachira. If we look at the West, we can see that usually on the other side of the barricade there are conservative parties, widely understood social movements that sometimes are more active than professional politicians on this area, not always related to political movements, religious ones as well, churches. They try to contradict these social changes, addressing moral protection of family values, morality, and other arguments. You have, I believe, big experience of criticizing this kind of position. Before joining active policy, you observe how these people react. You see their reaction on your postulate and your arguments. If you can tell us, what leads religious people, conservative views people, so what makes them be so afraid of these social changes? Why do they want to have such a control or influence on how other people they don't know, would live inside their walls at their homes? In fact, I think it's a result of their weakness and their uncertainty, because if their conservative, oppressing lifestyle, I mean, these conservative persons, whether they are politicians or some social movements, if their supreme goal is to forge their beliefs into some legislation norms, well, they are weak if they cannot convince people in a good manner. According to Concordat and other regulations, we cannot go into a secular country. That means about the weakness of the postulates, because, well, I can imagine, let's stick to the same example of a church. If it's so good at church, we don't have to force children to go to religion classes. These children would go there on their own. They would dream about it. And I can say that I was this kind of a child, because for me, when I was 7 or 8, it was cool. We sang songs, and I haven't seen anything bad in that when I was a girl. Only later it turned out that they have this vision of taking people, controlling people, and they are telling you what you can do and what you cannot. So small children would not know that. After I found out, I immediately ran away from there. These liberal views that I was brought up in made me do that. Not everyone has this background. Quite often from the hypocrisies, sometimes because they cannot deal with it on their own. It's easier for them. I observe this. I look at these conservative politicians, and I see no cohesion whatsoever. I'm a classical liberal, worldview liberal and economical liberal, and if I vote about economic ideas with Confederation present in the room, you voted like Confederation? Well, no, they voted like me, because I'm a real liberal. I step by step implement liberal values, and they just changed their flags. There is no consequence in their actions, because how can you call it a consequence if they allow you to have a business? Maybe they made some slacking regulation in free market, but on the other side they want to ban abortion to women, but also probably to be elected in Sejm, because some of them would say why women should have some voting rights if husband knows better how to vote. So what that has in common with liberalism? So I think it's the lack of belief in these so-called values they try to popularize, and it would be easier to live in country, of course, for them where there is just one opinion. Well, in a dictatorship, it's just very simple for authority. It's very easy to live in dictatorship if you are an authority. We had this grotesque attempt to introduce dictatorships during aid last year, and we all saw that it's nothing good. So that's where it comes from, and the answer can be only loud spreading of liberalism in every possible sector. I can't see any other way. Sticking to human rights and freedoms, for internal and external freedom to live as you choose. Between liberalism and democracy, especially when it comes to personal freedoms, there is a certain tension. MP Szymanowska, a question to you. You represent a group that works on deciding can abortion be allowed in a referendum. It's a form where some people decide upon life of other people, because not everyone has a voting right. Incapacitated or not adults cannot vote. So how would you directly comment this particular point of the referendum? Well, I will say that we allow to vote on that 450 MPs. I understand, but they have mandate. Yes, they have mandate, of course, but I will say it like that. I verified my opinion about referendum after I am a head of a commission for liberalization of abortion law. And what I saw, I got out a certain bubble, because if I see these conservative people, whether in Sejm or some social groups that came to Sejm, until that time I would never have this contact with them so much. So what's your impression? Well, it's terrifying, and I'm most terrified that someone is against depenalization, and at the same time, just a moment before the vote, he says, I cannot vote for because it allows 24 weeks after. I say, where? People don't read the act about where people are waiting for this vote. Women wait. But it turned out that there's a lot of MPs like that they were sure that we want to liberalize law and to allow to do abortion. Some people say even before the inception. One MP from Confederation said he would penalize even to make abortion after a rape, and every raped woman would say that they have to carry that children. But I would say, you know, you are not threatened to something like that, to have a children from a rape. I cannot say to a woman that she has to keep a children that is a result of a crime. If she wants that, of course she can do that. But forcing someone and make this law even more harsh, oh please. I have a lot of school trips to Sejm, and I all the time try to ask them, please vote, be aware how you vote, know these people, check these people, don't vote on the principle just number one, so I cross it, or last place I cross it. No, find out what these people represent, what they speak, because unfortunately later there is a big, I must say, I was much younger. I had one time a case. I voted Godson MP in Lodz, very sympathetic person. Yeah, I remember when he voted against civic union. I was so furious because it was such a light project. I can't imagine what can be bad so that someone would find out about health condition of a person that is in hospital unconscious, for instance. So just small details like that, and he would vote against. And only then I found out that he is a pastor of some church of some Adventists of Seventh Day, of something similar, and it was shock. And until that time, I verify very well everyone whom I'm voting at. Not every Protestant is as liberal as some Catholics. And now we will change a subject a bit. You're a specialist from Eastern Europe. Personal freedom in liberalism is presented as a universal value, but isn't it such that every region has its specificity, cultural but also historical peculiarities, which makes Eastern Europe and Central Europe a difficult ground to incept this concept, so it's more difficult to MPs than in Western Europe. Or on the other side, maybe there is something in the consciousness that we know that personal freedom is more risky for us in the East than it is for people in Western Europe, and we choose these politicians like Sawicki or Johnson.
I want to make a joke on the lady member of parliament who is asking people to very carefully check who they vote for. It's true, of course, but it's worth to also check the party you belong to. But I'm not obliged to vote when it comes to my views. Okay, it was just a joke. So when it comes to the Middle Europe and its specificity, there can be several ways of taking a look at it. You, for instance, mentioned, rightfully, a tendency that in the West we have more social permission when it comes to liberalization of the worldview. I agree totally. I am rather the one who, in a conflict, is rather in favor of I'm in favor of the in general, so that the basic ethics would be obvious, not to follow precisely what the state wants, but if we take a look at the morality of the Talibans and of Scandinavians, then it will turn out that the morality and ethics of Scandinavians are higher than Taliban's morality. But when it comes to the questions of deregulating economy, this differs. I don't have an opinion when it comes to trade on Sundays. I would prefer, of course, as everyone, to be able to go, but those are issues regarding protection of an employee which impact my opinion on this topic way more. But well, the West for a long time has not been as willing to deregulate entirely economy. And if we take a look at how it looks like, for instance, in Russia, well, Russia has been changing recently, but in Ukraine, for instance, where there is plenty of permission for such a deregulation, that everything can be open up 24/7. When they banned smoking inside, it was a shock. But if we take a look at places in the West where you cannot trade in on Sundays, there are more of those than in the Central Europe. It's since Orban and Kaczynski did it. But before, I don't know, Germany, I don't know what about France, but I guess it might depend on the region too. So this absolute deregulation looks to me like an attack on the market freedoms, which we've done 35 years ago. Right now, we are trying to understand that maybe it's too much, but such things like hysteria regarding the way how alcohol is being sold, this is a hiccups after the too much of the regulation that many people oppose to. Sometimes it's even funny. It at least made me funny, made me laugh. But if we look at the social need, then I see there's something behind it. So, for instance, I don't believe that Polish society is drinking much, especially compared to the way how it looked like previously. But should they decide that they need to impact somehow? What's the culture of alcohol consumption? Then maybe we should take into account whether this type of solutions or similar ones shouldn't be introduced in Poland. So here, let's spread it when it comes to the questions regarding the views. On the one hand side, we have an old conservatistic people's approach. There is also a reflection of what we came back to after the people's collapse, patriarchy of churches, like at the times of Lukashenko. And this, unfortunately, is the case. So this impacts our choices. Also, when it comes to our social choices in this part of the world. But you also need to know that it is not anymore as it used to be before. For sure, we are at a different point than we've been like at 20 years ago. Oh, you want an advocate? This is great. I wanted to give the floor to you. So I wanted to also shift to the questions whether there is a relationship, whether there are ties with the wave of regulating of lifestyle, pressure on the personal freedoms and limiting economic freedoms. To which extent is it related? To which extent freedom of market that offers wide offer, to which extent is it important for citizens who, thanks to it, can shape their lifestyles? I wanted to relate to an intervention here. I dislike such a claim that even Scandinavians wanted to. When Scandinavia is an example of those who are leading the regulation when it comes to the matter. They're the most restrictive when it comes to provisions. This is pretty important because it's the specificity of Lithuania and Scandinavia. We are also, to an extent, a country that finds it pretty gray in autumn. And in Scandinavia, they have even less lights than we do. So those are things that are a factor that is an incentive to drink alcohol. Well, Finland is like a sober Russia, and Russia is constantly drunk. So now let's hear the next panelist. So when it comes to alcohol regulations in Scandinavia, for instance, indeed, it is a case of those cases, those countries, but at the angle of no one is willing to finish one sentence. I'm sorry, there's nothing to interpret now. So Europe has the most liberal provisions at this angle when it comes to the limit of alcohol, for instance, when you're driving or consumption of alcohol in public spaces, also relating to sale. It's not regulated. And the Scandinavians, you know, are a case that is very vivid. But Scandinavians are one of the nations that are getting drunk most often, contrary to what we popularly believe in. Okay, so now about economic freedom, please. Is there any connection in between the two problems? Scandinavia is probably more often. But I think that freedom, there is one freedom. We can, of course, categorize different freedoms, just like we differentiate worldviews from economy, etc. So there are personal freedoms, economic freedoms. Okay, we can categorize it all, but those are not separate things. They impact one another. So freedom is one group, and it's simply easier for us to categorize it. And I think they impact one another much. So without a free market, we cannot speak about freedom of elections, of choice. Then it's limited in many ways, so that such a system could exist. And then when it comes to lifestyle, that we, for instance, ban trade on Sundays, it's a limitation of a choice for consumer and so on and so forth. But this is also limiting of economic freedoms because someone is in charge of those shops. Someone wants to sell on Sundays. Someone wants to work on Sundays, and they are not allowed to. So this also has an impact on the free market, same as banning to sell foods or some other things. So we are limiting the freedoms in such a way. But we perceive it rather from the point of view of a citizen or a consumer who has his freedoms limited. Madam Jachira, the question goes to you. Obligatory vegan first day in canteens, banning cheap flights in Europe, ban of SUV cars movement in the cities, ban on grilling, ban on fishing, using fishing rods in the nights. Those are sometimes countrywide and sometimes regional decisions of the Green Party in Germany. You are a member of the Green Party in Germany. Can you promise us that the Greens in Poland will not come up with such ideas? Because I understand, I assume, you don't support those. But there is also more serious of a question. You know what times we live in. To which extent questions regarding ecology and climate are justified reasons to limit freedoms and to regulate lifestyle? All right, I don't know why you cannot do fishing in the night, but you can in the day. That's interesting. Well, you know what? This is why also I became a member of the Greens. I wanted to show the green liberalism is possible, and I would even say that it's the future. And it's not my dream. It's not that I was the first one in the world who came up with that. I would like to take the ownership for that. Green liberalism is mine. Well, not. More and more research shows it. More and more. Well, business knows it. Business knows that shifting to the green energy sources is cheaper, it's healthier, it pays off. The whole communities are going to gain on it. But also the economic balance, preventing results of climate change or climate catastrophe is much cheaper than to cover from whether state budget or private funds the results of climate catastrophe. So this is simply an economic balance. If someone disagrees, then I encourage you to take a look at the capitalistic manifest book, the 8th chapter, which is all about the green change. When I'm usually speaking about this book, part of the Greens wanted to throw me away from the party. How can you? How dare you? So, well, I can, I dare. But then when I'm speaking, it was written by someone from Sweden. Oh, Sweden. All right. So maybe this capitalism is not so bad after all, if it was a Swedish author. Johan Norberg. I highly recommend the book. We've even discussed before we entered the panel that that he might be a panelist next year because he was here in the campus and his panel was very popular too. So very much green liberalism is possible. It's not in a form of prohibitions, but rather in a form of showing advantages and also economic advantages, but also health care-wise. What do we have to do? We have to, well, the economic growth is crucial so that we could afford environmental protection. So every single one of you who tells you, no, we are going to lock ourselves in the basement now, turn off the lights and live as if it was before the Industrial Revolution. No, we have to build as healthy, as rich possible economies as possible to be able to afford. We have to maintain competitiveness so that the free market would be as pro-eco as possible. We don't have to force that we have to build, because take a look at the Law and Justice, how they made it more and more difficult to build photovoltaic panels, and people still decided they wanted and they did it.
When Poles install these solar panels, it has to be done. Another part of my answer, we need to reject personal freedom. We need to distinguish it from anarchy. Because unfortunately, those who try to look like liberals, if we look at the extreme right wing, in Polish case, Confederation, quite often they present liberate postulate. I mean, they dress up anarchistic postulate as liberal ones. First example is exceeding speed. Basic speed, basic freedom finishes where other freedom starts. If you go too fast, you can kill someone. It's not your freedom anymore. So that you can go as fast as factory gives you a chance. It's an anarchy. Then you would drive as fast as you want. Same with face masks. You can get vaccinated, you can wear face mask because you care about society. If you remove the mask, maybe you get others sick and maybe they don't want to be sick. If you don't vaccinate, the resistance of the whole population will drop because you did not vaccinate your children or yourself. So in this movement, I would distinguish what is a personal freedom and what is a real freedom from what we agree upon living in a liberal democracy, not in anarchy. Thank you very much. MP Szymanowska. Yesterday we had Szymanowska. We heard from yesterday new left-wing young people are a source of postulate for lifestyle, identity policy, and what about protection for the uncertainty for public debate? Usually they work on freedom of speech. You worked on hate. I think it's quite a difficult point to distinguish where our freedom finishes and where justified limitation of freedom starts. I wanted to ask, because there are different opinions for that. I can admit that I am usually against when I see an opinion about the hate definition that limits freedom of speech. How could you draw a line precisely between what type of expressions may be unpleasant, very critical ones, against certain level of culture, but still acceptable as a freedom of speech, and what is not acceptable? Well, the fact is that I also worked on the act of Anti-Hater Act that was analyzed in Sejm, and I hope it will be proceeded. There is a case of a blind accusation. Right now, in order to prove that someone hates us, we need to find a person and show a perpetrator. But when we file a case into the court, we need to present what was lawful according to us, and then court will decide if that was hate and should it be prosecuted or not, and then they can send the proper law enforcement to check the IP and so on. Right now on X platform we see such a swamp. I just don't read it. I completely do not waste my energy on reading some these are usually some troll farms, some bots that would write some terrible, outrageous things. And I can't agree, because this hate, maybe we politicians have the awareness, we somehow manage that, but this hate is also directed against children. And if I hear that a son of Stanowski, editor from Zero Channel, received a message, I will not quote exactly, but in general, in more pleasant ways, I will chop off your head. I mean, it's a threat of, it's illegal criminal threat. I mean, but as a result of attacks on a father, children was targeted. At some point, children might not handle that. Or, you fat pig, how do you look in the mirror? This kind of content, if it's written, if someone writes such things to me, I mean, in the past there was no internet. In school corridors you could hear words like that. Yes, but then you knew who would say that. Now you even don't know that. If someone said that in a classroom, 20 people would hear that, and 2 days later we were friends again. But right now it transformed into this kind of aggression that really I'm sometimes terrified. And on the other side you have political correctness. Well, pig is a nice animal. Well, fat, it's a body positive. What's wrong with that? So it's a closed circle. Yes, recently someone wrote me, start to measure sugar in your body because you are fat, maybe you have a diabetes. I said, well, yes, I have diabetes, I measure it regularly, so it can make me laugh at best. But when I see very sharp hate, I remember a song of Coma group from Lodz. Basically, he would say, do not read haters' comments, save your energy. And the last question, to summarize our discussion, we live in difficult times. The wave of these regulations is just one of the forms. Our societies radicalize, they are more and more disinformed by different centers. There is a lot of populism, a lot of fear about the future. We try to build foundations to go back to freedom wherever it was limited. What do you think? Can that happen? It's just the beginning of the process. For now, they forbid these tubes with alcohol, but when it can end, at some point, personal freedom can be very seriously limited. Then how this century will differ from previous centuries? Well, this tube with alcohol, I don't know if it's the right example, because in this case, well, in quite grotesque way, some social fear came up. I laughed at it myself. But now, if we look at it like at some fear to live in a place where people think that alcohol is a problem, I don't know if it's a good example, but I think it's a bit like MP Jachira said, this conservatism and this desire to put on this limitation is a result of fear and weakness. And this right wing always tries to flex their muscles when they say that we need to ban this and that. And the left wing represents the weakest one, those unprotected. So they also want to regulate certain things, maybe sometimes economic things, which I more agree to. If those are some moral things, I would rather not agree to that because I'm more liberal in this case. Then I think this forecast depends on what conclusions can we draw from these signalized fears, because who won on communist revolution? That on one side developed quite primitive Eastern countries, but then left in a difficult condition when West went forward. But also this revolution had an impact, and it led to creating more sensible rules about labor law and so on. So it depends on us whether we fall into this extremism of the fears and allow to take us on leash, or we are someone who draw conclusions and introduce solutions that will be results of that fears, because these fears for us are some indicators. Thank you very much. We have 6, maybe 7 minutes time for questions from the audience. Fourth row, I see someone who wishes to ask a question. Piotr Oliński, that's right. I wanted to refer to that alcohol tubes matter. I agree to Ziemowit Szczerek that the product itself is some funny thing, but definitely it wasn't funny when I saw that when on Twitter I could see a prime minister reacting saying to the minister that he has to, during 3 hours, react to that, and then it looked like a critical condition. Then some comment about finishing up one of the manufacturer. This product was legal. It could happen that some children burn with barbecue during summer. So would we fight off the barbecue manufacturers the same way with administrative tools? What should we do in case of moral panic? Maybe another question. First of all, thank you for so interesting discussion. And I would like to relate to many questions, but I will not do. I will ask about something that wasn't mentioned, about censorship in the internet. As an example, I can present Facebook. And first thing, why did we agree that some words that normally are treated to be common regular words, but they cannot be, you can't write them on Facebook or in the internet. Do you see any possibility to regain this piece of freedom? And in other side, this platform, like other platforms, collect our data, saying that they are some kind of social media, but in fact they are a platform to collect data, our private data, and a platform that forces us to buy some products. It's a quite broad question. I think that the whole panel could be dedicated to this question. Who wants to answer? I will answer. Thank you. Thank you for your words, because I have this similar appearance that there is a panics, and most of politicians were tricked on that. So in this regard, I didn't feel like it was such an important issue that I need to comment on that, because like if we say there are juices in glass bottles and vodka is also available in glass bottles, so what now, we should ban juices in glass bottles? You can make a mistake at any case, just like that example with the barbecue in the summer that you mentioned. So you are absolutely right. It's unfortunately an effect of populism of the last decade of reigns of populists. I think that those are changes that I also can see in my workplace, in Polish Parliament. Unfortunately, populists during 8 years implemented such a social changes that Democrats fall into that, and they start using populist methods for some messages, and that's painful. But to balance that against any alcoholic tubes, I personally believe that everything should be legal, but when it comes to stimulants, we know what effects it can have on health. It should be legal because it's your decision whether you want to take it or not to create gray zone. But tax stimulants, I believe, yes. If state wants to make money, let them make money on cigarettes, on alcohol tubes, on whatever stimulant, but let's not ban it. Me as well, when it comes to alcoholic tubes, I had different opinion about this matter before getting to same. I spent some time in a orphanage and in a foster family. I know for what reason children get to this kind of places. It's also alcoholic problems. We don't say that aloud, but among our friends, we probably have a lot of high-functioning alcoholics. We wouldn't think about them like that, but every day they consume at least some portion of alcohol. Even if I am taking part in waste collections, you know what thing I'm finding the most often? Small vodka bottles. And it's not drinking with friends at a table, but it's just easy to consume small portion of alcohol. 100 or 200, it's not a alcohol tube. I think the problem with tubes was that, just briefly to communicate, the way how the problem was addressed. Like in the East, in Belarus, find this business, find a paragraph I mean, it was some niche product that was available in few markets, few shops. What MP Jachira said about a tax, I'm not sure. Excise tax. I'm definitely against the increase of excise in the form that is suggested by Minister of Finance right now, because that form is harmful. The fact that state put taxes on this kind of products is clear, and that harmful products is clear. But if you want to increase a tax couple times more, less harmful products than those more harmful, it's strange, and it's against the experience of other countries like France or Great Britain, that the portion of e-cigarettes or other alternative tobacco products, they replace traditional cigarettes, they reduce harm, but they do not stop the inflow of new smokers addicted.
I don't like to be a moderator. I have to interrupt you. Someone would like to take a floor regarding Facebook very briefly. Censorship on Facebook. This is a fact. Everyone who fought, because Elon Musk was taking over Twitter, thinking that he would liquidate censorship in Twitter. And 2 years or 2.5 years after he took over, Twitter lost 80% of its value since the moment it was purchased. So now it's to promote one candidate and USA. And censorship is still there. So this is a topic for a separate debate, in my opinion. But it seems like in utopia to me. Algorithms are always going to be in favor of something in one way. We only can reflect on what they will be favorizing, but I doubt there will be a beautiful world there. I don't want to save the world, nor give you any Saturday evening-ish solutions for the humanity, but I want to give you an interesting fun fact. As much as a vocabulary there is derogative to gay people are banned on Facebook, but in Serbia they are not, because of the fact that main slogan of anti-Vucic movement and demonstrations was Vuciciu Pedero, which meant that he's gay, apparently. So a slogan of democratic opposition. I wish all the best to the democratic opposition in Serbia. Of course, the non-nationalistic part of it, because they also have the nationalistic one. But it seems to be a nuanced case to such an extent that we cannot have one. On a Saturday evening, drinking a glass of wine, and uncle is going to give you the solution to the world. So this is it to our panel today. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Radość, nadzieja, życie, wyzwanie, pasja, pamięć, zaufanie, pokój, jedność. Słowa tworzą świat. Polskie Radio. Źródło wiarygodnych informacji.
Uwielbiam szycie w sieci. Wczoraj podszyłem się pod wnuczka, wieczorem uszyłem intrygę na apce randkowej, a dziś planuję grubymi nićmi szyte oszustwo z promocją. Tak się szyje.
Na oszustów są sposoby. Zapoznaj się z poradami ekspertów na niedajsiepodszyć.pl.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
dziennikarz telewizji polskiej.
Chodzi o działania polityczne.
Przygotowanie ofiar dla pedofilów.
Für Deutschland.
TVP Info. Włącz się na nowo.
Polskie Radio.
Jedynka.
Dziś Nowy Jork, jutro Londyn. Za chwilę Paryż, Warszawa, Berlin. Na całym świecie kultura pulsuje rytmem. Wystarczy tylko włączyć dwójkę. Dwójka, Polskie Radio. Jesteś na miejscu.
Plany biznesowe powstają z marzeń. Dlatego nie ma dwóch takich samych firm. Jedni chcą działać na całym świecie. Innym cały świat mieści się w dłoni. Sukces biznesu to nie tylko jego wielkość, ale też szczęście, jakie przynosi ludziom. PKO Bank Polski.
Rodzina spółek Pelion to 12 tysięcy osób pracujących w ponad 300 spółkach w Polsce, Szwecji, Wielkiej Brytanii i na Litwie. Jesteśmy liderem w branży ochrony zdrowia. Od 1990 roku dbamy o długość i jakość życia. Pracować z nami możesz w jednym z 7 obszarów.